Dear friends, what a joy to be together again. We shall continue our study of chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. John introduced unto us a woman in the wilderness sitting on a scarlet beast. He has some more details about this woman. We can continue reading the description he gives us from verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. He carried me away in the wilderness. We have already seen the importance of wilderness in the Bible, and we read about God leading His people in the desert. Prophet Hosea tells us about this. Let us read this text, Hosea chapter 2 verse 14 or 16 depending on your version. Hosea 2:14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, will bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfort to her. So God led His people into the wilderness, perhaps in hard conditions, but in conditions where He could talk to them. We also met with this woman in Revelation chapter 12. Now, if we continue, we realize that the woman in the wilderness is no longer in a situation where God could speak to her heart. But we see her sitting on a scarlet beast, and scarlet is the sign of royalty. When the Roman soldiers wanted to make fun of Jesus, they clothed Him with a scarlet robe. Let's read that in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 27-28. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around Him, and they stripped Him and put a scarlet robe on Him. It was a way to mock, and you know that above the cross was an inscription, "Here is the King of the Jews." Thus, we understand that scarlet was a sign of royalty. In this present case, the beast is scarlet. That means it claims royalty. The real problem is that in verse 4, the woman is arrayed in purple and scarlet. And we understand that there is here a competition for kingship already existing between the woman and the beast, and that will ultimately end in a conflict. There cannot be 2 pretenders to the throne. For the time being, the system appears to be stable. The woman is sitting on the beast. But what will the situation be afterwards? She is sitting on the beast. When we see God sitting on His throne, He sits with the Lamb, and the overall impression that emerges most strongly is totally different. This beast is still describing full of blasphemous names. Let us read it in chapter 17 and verse 3. A woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. We know much about this beast. He came up out of the sea. He received a deadly wound, then he was healed. And now, he is described in his second phase as a beast arising out of the abyss. Moreover, the situation has especially worsened. At the beginning of chapter 13, he has on his head a blasphemous name, verse 1. And then in verse 5, he speaks blasphemies. Whereas now, he is full of names of blasphemy. Once again, in uttering blasphemies, he usurps God's place. Thus, we see that both the woman and the beast not only claim royalty, but their aim is to take God's place. There lies a competition that in the end will result in a confrontation between the woman and the beast. Continuing our study, we read the following, verse 4. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. This woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones. She is appealing, and in the eyes of men she appears as an extremely rich system, extremely strong, and they are amazed. On the other hand, we saw that the New Jerusalem is a gem. Now, what is important here is that she holds in her hand a golden cup, the golden bowls were used in the temple to offer incense. And effectively, chapter 5, verse 8 of Revelation, we see the elders holding golden bowls. Let's read this. Revelation 5:8. Now, when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. In these bowls there is incense, and this incense rising towards God is nothing else than the prayers. So they are here the representatives of the people. Now the golden bowl of Babylon holds only abominations and prostitutions. It means that there is a service in the likeness of a religious service, but turned to prostitution and abomination. And they mix gold, a precious metal intended for offering prayers, with the abomination and prostitution. And in this golden bowl contains what he has given the inhabitants of the earth to drink.
Cette coupe d'or, il y a ce qu'elle a donné à boire aux habitants de la terre.
Let's go back again to chapter 8, verse 3.
Au chapitre 8 et au verset 3, nous voyons
In this verse, we see an angel offering incense. Revelation chapter 8, verse 3. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. You see, normally the elders gave incense to the priest, and it was the priest who offered this incense. And our high priest is Jesus. Offering or pretending to offer incense means usurping the place of Christ. Therefore, it is a plagiarized religious service. But as he drags all the people, all the earth behind him, this means seduction. I invite you now to read verse 5, Revelation 17:5. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. A mystery. It is a word that Paul uses repeatedly. It does not mean that the thing remains mysterious, but it may have been for a long time a mystery, even if now it has been disclosed. The concept of Babylon is obviously an old concept. It goes back to Babel and its tower. You know, the Tower of Babel? We have lost sight of the idea of a world government. It is but recently that we have found this concept back. It is regarded not as an idea but as a must by most of the inhabitants of the earth, a world authority, both in politics and in economic matters. This is no longer a mystery, but a recent concept. Now, she, that is Babylon, is called the mother of harlots. It means that she has committed adultery with the kings of the earth. She has sought support among all kinds of political authorities, but in fact, she has, after all, dragged all the nations after her. Which means that this concept of collusion of politics and religious eventually ended up in seducing the whole earth. We find this notion of seduction in chapter 18, verse 23. Revelation 18:23. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. The word used here is pharmakia. It means pharmacopoeia, that is, drugs. In the bowl, she has a drug that has deceived the whole world. I would like to emphasize the composite nature of Babylon. She is the mother of harlots, then she has emulators, and when we saw her fall in chapter 16, verse 19, we are told that when she fell, all the cities fell with her. Let us read this verse together, Revelation 16, verse 19. Now, the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Babylon is so important, has so many emulators, has made so many disciples that, when she falls, it is all the cities of the nations that fall. Then verse 6 is where John is going to be surprised. Revelation chapter 17, verse 6. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. This extraordinary system, adorned with gold, precious stones, receiving the homage of all the earth, is actually a bloodthirsty system. We have a confirmation in chapter 18, because when Babylon is falling, then tongues are being loosened. You know that whatever the system in place, when it falls, folders open, tongues are loosened, and facts speak, and all that had been silenced so far by fear is revealed. So, let's keep in mind what is said in Revelation 18, verse 24. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. Consequently, John says that he marvels with great amazement. So there may be 2 reasons for this amazement. Either it is because he sees this woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus, or because he left in chapter 13 a woman in the wilderness close to God, nourished by God, faithful, and now he finds her in a completely opposite situation. This astonishment is rendered by the Greek word taumasso. Therefore, it is an amazement, it's a bewilderment. However, a little further in verse 8, we see that the inhabitants of the earth themselves are astonished by something else. While John is amazed by the sight of this woman, the inhabitants of the earth are astonished at that of the beast. Let's look at verse 8. The beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition, and those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. There lies the astonishment of the inhabitants of the earth. A system that was strong, which is fallen, which has received a mortal wound, which normally should not be recovered from it, but yet did recover. What a strength, what a power, what an ability to rebound. And if someone is looking for some strong system, it is towards this system that he will automatically turn to, regardless of its mortal state. But it lasts. And that's what men are looking for, a system that lasts. On the other hand, John is amazed. But he is amazed at the moral condition of this woman. He is amazed at that she was apparently faithful, and now she turns unfaithful. So, what about us? What leads us to astonishment? Basically, does this reflect what we seek? Are we surprised by the power, by the ability to rebound? Or is it that we are surprised by a moral state, by a deficient moral state, not to say perverse or perverted? Are we surprised by power and riches? Are we surprised by poverty, modesty, strength of character? You see that there is a huge difference between the amazement of the population and the amazement of John. Do we search for truth, justice, or are we in search of power? You should know. We must know. I invite you to look at verse 7, Revelation 17:7. But the angel said to me, "Why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns." Noting John's amazement, the angel says, "Well, I'll give you some explanations." He will give him explanations about the woman and the beast that carries her. In Greek, it is the word bastazo. Bastazo means to carry, but also to support, to help, in the sense of supporters. Undoubtedly, the beast supports the woman, even though we saw that there were probably ulterior motives and covetousness to kingship, to general hegemony. But for now, the beast supports the woman. And John is receiving from the angel a series of explanations. The angel successively explains who the beast is, the beast with heads and horns. He explains about the head, the horns, what the waters represent, and even he eventually tells him who the woman is. So, if you want explanations on the heads, the horns, the waters, the woman, we should go to chapter 17, and especially, I remind you of the last verse, verse 18, which says, "And the woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth." We have already seen this verse. We have seen a series of explanations. And while this series of explanations should have made this text easy to understand, well, curiously, it still remains one of the most difficult of the whole book of Revelation. So, what does this mean? Does this mean that when we are given explanations, we still have troubles to catch the meaning of them? And that if we are not given further details, then we choose whatever explanation we want to make it understandable? I don't believe so. Rather, I believe that we must remain faithful to our text, that when we are in need of more light, we better look for missing explanations through other Bible texts as we have been doing so far. And we must take very seriously those explanations into consideration. Here we are fortunate to have explanations from the book of Revelation itself. And you have seen that we have always been seeking information from other Bible texts. So this is the principle of interpretation I hereby propose you follow faithfully. The Bible explains itself. We better go to the source for explanations of symbols or whatsoever we need to understand rather than through our imagination. Everything is in the Bible. May God help us to find them. I would just like to say, they are there. Go and find them.